I hope not to teach you anything new. I hope not to woo you with some pseudo-profundity or general rhetoric. I hope not to inundate you with theoretically agitating academic abstractionism, or to inundate and endow upon you some sort of mystical knowledge I've happened to stumble upon. But simply I hope to remind you of a small, very special truth. A truth that amidst our sophisticated and very busy lives, we seem to have forgotten. Today I want to talk to you about culture, words, and language, and how they inform and influence each other. A culture can broadly be seen as a collective social behavior of a particular group of people or society. A culture is the embodiment of their values, of what they appreciate, their practice, or sometimes dictates social order. And it's sometimes manifested through things like practice, arts, foods, and a plethora of various other external recreations of their inner psyche. A culture also helps people interpret and make sense of the physical world around them that they find themselves immersed within. Thus, a fundamental cornerstone of cultural manifestation is the describing of or the ascribing of certain things through the formulation and the use of words. Now, words can be seen to be the outward projection of the inner state through the proclamation of meaningful utterances or the designation or demarcation of physical objects by affixing captions for public common reference through a system of words. The system often takes two forms: through a body of organized text or characters, which our literature is based on, or through deliberate sequencing of air pressure, scales of vibrations producing scores of vocal tones, depending on how we stretch or fold our lips or how taut or slack our tongue lies in our mouths, the space that acts as a hall where our words find reverberation. To put that simply, talking. But it's not that simple, is it? Something about words that makes them powerful. Something else makes them very potent. It's their ability to capture emotion, the ability to encapsulate them and preserve them in their perfect original condition and make them immune to the decay that time seems to have on everything else. Words make the internal immortal. So, more and more words are used and created and recycled and repeatedly used, and this all culminates to form a body of structurally assembled words that we call a language. Now, a language can serve as a critical point of entry, of gaining insight about people, their cultures, and their practices, indicating time periods and insight of how a group perceives and understands the world internally and externally, and creates a window for us to witness the collective psyche of a particular group of people. It's like a placard of existing social knowledge that currently exists. A language is also a channel of thought, of expression, and to teach. And they fundamentally affect another person because we tend to internalize words. Now, to internalize means to make part of oneself. So language is also used as a tool of communication. This is a basic human function. You learn how to communicate or learn how to learn to communicate from a very young age, but also to facilitate human-to-human interaction, to elicit mutual meeting of the minds, to understand or just to connect. So it's through language and the meaning of words and culture that we shape our social interactions and to understand ourselves and others. This leads me to the cheese hypothesis. Now, the cheese hypothesis was an experiment I ran with quite a number of people. South Africa officially has 11 official languages. And save for Afrikaans and English, I could not seem to find, and I speak under correction here, I could not seem to find the word cheese in any other African language. Now, basically explained like an original word for cheese, not variations like e-cheese or I-cheese, right? Which is what the Xhosa tend to do. That's what the Xhosa language tends to do. You just add an E or an I in front of anything and you English, there you go. So, these remaining 9 languages don't seem to have their own original version of cheese. And I invite anyone to please correct me if I'm wrong. So imagine trying to explain the concept, the idea, the texture, the taste of cheese to someone who has never encountered it before. So when you find yourself in a miscommunication debacle, take a step back to think, cheese. Maybe this person doesn't have a word for cheese. Now, there is a dark side. Language can also be used as a tool to disconnect, to oppress, and to destroy. And it's created from a culture of violence, of hatred, and destruction. I don't have to complete the spellings of those words to evoke some sort of internal emotional discomfort within you now. This is just an example of the power of preservation of emotion through words. In South African social and political discourse, words were, and still are in many ways, were used and bound up in relations of power. Our language and dialogues and words were highly politicized and highly racialized, and is often adversarial and militantly charged. When describing debate, for example, you use terms like engage in debate. You strategize to attack your opponent. All military terms as well. You destroy the argument that is put forward before you. All of these underlie and contain a culture of violent and aggressive demeanor. But here's the thing. The power is not attached to the word. The power is attached to people. And thus the power lies within the user of the word, whether we use it personally or socially or institutionally. When the abuse of this power happens, we get manifestations as extreme like the Nazi regime. This was a culture led by a highly influential individual who used words to belittle a particular group and politicized and charged those words and organized and galvanized an entire society to wage a war against humanity, to wage a war against the world. We speak the same thing when we talk about the apartheid regime, whether it's the Israeli and Palestine apartheid or the South African apartheid, where language was used to structurally oppress a particular group. Post-1994, we were thrust and leapt into a constitutionally democratic dispensation that was inclusive, and the euphoria can be characterized and described as peace, equality, rainbow nation, unity, freedom. But 20 years later, these words and that language remains powerless because it doesn't have a strong cultural basis. We're still using words pre-1994 to describe each other, to talk to each other. And in so doing, we've revived the encapsulated and perfectly preserved memories and emotions from that tumultuous time. We see it in our public discourse, political debates, parliamentary debates. We see it in how we speak to each other. And it's not always what we say, it's how we say it. A really cool quote by me. We can't hope to change tomorrow today if we're still using yesterday's words today. Those words did not go away, don't get me wrong, The problem is they were merely dismissed as public taboo, but still remain privately acceptable and practiced. We need to make a few changes. And the first one is, we need to change how we speak to each other. And it can be something as small as just being mindful of the tone you use when you're saying something to someone. We need to actively build a culture, a practice that embodies and encapsulates our collective values of equality, of freedom, of justice, of genuine human understanding. And it is from this culture that we can build words that encapsulate and preserve these values and make them immortal. It's from these immortal words that we can construct a language that aims to build rather than to break, a language of kindness rather than a language of hatred, a language that protects rather than a language that harms. And in this way, we internally shift and affect ourselves and affect others. And so we can reconstruct a society through culture, words, and language. Thank you.